Chapter 3 and 4 of the Grand Babylon Hotel. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anna Simon. The Grand Babylon Hotel by Arnold Bennett. Chapter 3. At 3 a.m. Mr. Reginald Dimmock proved himself, despite his extreme youth, to be a man of the world and of experiences, and a practised talker. Conversation between him and Nella Racksole seemed never to flag. They chatted about St. Petersburg, and the ice on the Neva, and the tenor at the opera who had been exiled to Siberia, and the quality of Russian tea, and the sweetness of Russian champagne, and various other aspects of Muscovite existence. Russia exhausted, Nella lightly outlined her own doings since she had met the young man in the Tsar's capital, and this recital brought the topic round to London, where it stayed till the final piece of steak was eaten. Theodore Racksole noticed that Mr. Dimmock gave very meagre information about his own movements, either past or future. He regarded the youth as a typical hanger-on of courts, and wondered how he had obtained his post of companion to Prince Aribert of Posen, and who Prince Aribert of Posen might be. The millionaire thought he had once heard of Posen, but he wasn't sure. He rather fancied it was one of those small, nondescript German states of which 5/6 of the subjects are palace officials, and the rest charcoal burners or innkeepers. Until the meal was nearly over, Racksole said little. Perhaps his thoughts were too busy with Jules' wink to Mr. Dimmock, but when ices had been followed by coffee, he decided that it might be as well, in the interests of the hotel, to discover something about his daughter's friend. He never for an instant questioned her right to possess her own friends. He had always left her in the most amazing liberty, relying on her inherited good sense to keep her out of mischief. But, quite apart from the wink, he was struck by Nella's attitude towards Mr. Dimmock, an attitude in which an amiable scorn was blended with an evident desire to propitiate and please. "Nella tells me, Mr. Dimmock, that you hold a confidential position with Prince Aribert of Posen," said Racksole. "You will pardon an American's ignorance, but is Prince Aribert a reigning prince? What, I believe, you call in Europe a prince regnant?" "His Highness is not a reigning prince, nor ever likely to be," answered Dimmock. "The Grand Ducal throne of Posen is occupied by his Highness's nephew, the Grand Duke Eugen." "Nephew?" cried Nella with astonishment. "Why not, dear lady?" "But Prince Aribert is surely very young?" The Prince, by one of those vagaries of chance which occur sometimes in the history of families, is precisely the same age as the Grand Duke. The late Grand Duke's father was twice married, hence this youthfulness on the part of an uncle. "How delicious to be the uncle of someone as old as yourself! But I suppose it is no fun for Prince Aribert. I suppose he has to be frightfully respectful and obedient and all that to his nephew." "The Grand Duke and my serene master are like brothers. At present, of course, Prince Aribert is nominally heir to the throne, but as no doubt you are aware, the Grand Duke will shortly marry a near relative of the Emperor's, and should there be a family—" Mr. Dimmock stopped and shrugged his straight shoulders. "The Grand Duke," he went on, without finishing the last sentence, "would much prefer Prince Aribert to be his successor. He really doesn't want to marry. Between ourselves, strictly between ourselves, he regards marriage as rather a bore. But, of course, being a German Grand Duke, he is bound to marry. He owes it to his country, to Posen." "How large is Posen?" asked Racksole bluntly. "Father!" Nella interposed, laughing, "you shouldn't ask such inconvenient questions. You ought to have guessed that it isn't etiquette to inquire about the size of a German dukedom." "I am sure," said Dimmock with a polite smile, "that the Grand Duke is as much amused as anyone at the size of his territory. I forget the exact acreage, but I remember that once Prince Aribert and myself walked across it and back again in a single day." "Then the Grand Duke cannot travel very far within his own dominions. You may say that the sun does set on his empire." "It does," said Dimmock. "Unless the weather is cloudy," Nella put in. "Is the Grand Duke content always to stay at home?" "On the contrary, he is a great traveller, much more so than Prince Aribert. I may tell you, what no one knows at present outside this hotel, that His Royal Highness the Grand Duke, with a small suite, will be here tomorrow." "In London?" asked Nella. "Yes." "In this hotel?" "Yes." "Oh, how lovely!" "That is why your humble servant is here tonight. a sort of advance guard." "But I understood," Racksole said, "that you were attached to Prince Aribert, the uncle." "I am. Prince Aribert will also be here. The Grand Duke and the Prince have business about important investments connected with the Grand Duke's marriage settlement. In the highest quarters, you understand." "For so discreet a person," thought Racksole, "you are fairly communicative." Then he said aloud, "Shall we go out on the terrace?" As they crossed the dining room, Jules stopped Mr Dimmock and handed him a letter. "Just come, sir, by messenger," said Jules. Nella dropped behind for a second with her father. "Leave me alone with this boy a little, there's a dear parent," she whispered in his ear. "I am a mere cipher, an obedient nobody," Racksole replied, pinching her arm surreptitiously. "Treat me as such. Use me as you like. I will go and look after my hotel." And soon afterwards he disappeared. Nella and Mr Dimmock sat together on the terrace, sipping iced drinks. They made a handsome couple, bowered amid plants which blossomed at the command of a Chelsea wholesale florist. People who passed by remarked privately that from the look of things there was the beginning of a romance in that conversation. Perhaps there was, but a more intimate acquaintance with the character of Nella Racksole would have been necessary in order to predict what precise form that romance would take. Jules himself served the liquids, and at 10 o'clock he brought another note. Entreating 1,000 pardons, Reginald Dimmock, after he had glanced at the note, excused himself on the plea of urgent business for his serene master, uncle of the Grand Duke of Posen. He asked if he might fetch Mr Racksole, or escort Miss Racksole to her father. But Miss Racksole said gaily that she felt no need of an escort and should go to bed. She added that her father and herself always endeavoured to be independent of each other. Just then Theodore Racksole had found his way once more into Mr Babylon's private room. Before arriving there, however, he had discovered that in some mysterious manner the news of the change of proprietorship had worked its way down to the lowest strata of the hotel's cosmos. The corridors hummed with it, and even under-servants were to be seen discussing the thing, just as though it mattered to them. "Have a cigar, Mr Racksole," said the urbane Mr Babylon, "and a mouthful of the oldest cognac in all Europe." In a few minutes these two were talking eagerly, rapidly. Felix Babylon was astonished at Racksole's capacity for absorbing the details of hotel management, and as for Racksole, he soon realized that Felix Babylon must be a prince of hotel managers. It had never occurred to Racksole before that to manage an hotel, even a large hotel, could be a specially interesting affair, or that it could make any excessive demands upon the brains of the manager, but he came to see that he had underrated the possibilities of an hotel. The business of the Grand Babylon was enormous. It took Racksole, with all his genius for organization, exactly half an hour to master the details of the hotel laundry work. And the laundry work was but one branch of activity amid scores, and not a very large one at that. The machinery of checking supplies, and of establishing a mean ratio between the raw stuff received in the kitchen and the number of meals served in the salle à manger and the private rooms, was very complicated and delicate. When Racksole had grasped it, he at once suggested some improvements, and this led to a long theoretical discussion, and the discussion led to digressions, and then Felix Babylon, in a moment of absent-mindedness, yawned. Racksole looked at the gilt clock on the high mantelpiece. "Great Scott!" he said. "It's 3 o'clock. Mr Babylon, accept my apologies for having kept you up to such an absurd hour." "I have not spent so pleasant an evening for many years. You have let me ride my hobby to my heart's content. It is I who should apologize." Racksole rose. "I should like to ask you one question," said Babylon. "Have you ever had anything to do with hotels before?" "Never," said Racksole. "Then you have missed your vocation. You could have been the greatest of all hotel managers. You would have been greater than me, and I am unequalled, though I keep only one hotel, and some men have half a dozen. Mr Racksole, why have you never run an hotel?" "Heaven knows," he laughed. "But you flatter me, Mr Babylon." "I? Flatter? You do not know me. I flatter no one, except, perhaps now and then, an exceptionally distinguished guest, in which case I give suitable instructions as to the bill." "Speaking of distinguished guests, I am told that a couple of German princes are coming here tomorrow." "That is so." "Does one do anything?